All right, we are back in the wonderful world of Facebook Live and join.me. Let's get away from that screen. There we go. All right. Who do we got here? We got Stacy. We got Jennifer. Gail. Gail from where? It just says Gail. Is Gail
I'm
there?
representing the Finn.
I'm sorry? The Finn. Oh, awesome. Okay. And who's one? We got a 1, 2, 3 here. I don't know who that is. Have all of you received your awesome evictions mug? This is not in favor now because the federal government has deemed that landlords should not be evicting because times are tough.
I have not received mine.
You have not. Stop by the office. If you dare to brave the outdoors, we've got more mugs. And, oh, David Rohr, great shirt. Thank you, David. Again, a non-landlord who is just home bored, I am sure. Dave, hey, how's it going? But Dave, though he does not have an evictions mug and he is not a landlord, Dave, good morning, Amanda. Dave is one of the few people who has my ChaseNet evictions cycling kit, which is the cycling jersey and bib shorts, which is an awesome cycling kit. It's really cool design. I can't take credit for the artwork, but anyhow, I can't show you that now though because I'm at the office and I'm not dressed in cycling kit. Dean, how's it going? And Dave is complimenting me on my hat, so I figure I'm trying to very hard not to wear political stuff. So I've got my Bike for Chai shirt, which is the charity bike ride I do every year. I will be harassing all my clients, even though we're all losing money. We're all terribly suffering. Every August, this is going to be my third year. For Dave watching on Facebook, it's going to be, I think his 10th year because he's been doing it since the beginning, if I'm not mistaken. Bike for Chai is a massively successful charity bike ride. Last year, just under 600 cyclists raised about $10 million, a little over $10 million for a very, very good cause. I know, Stacy, we've talked about this before. Some of my clients have already generously donated this year, and then I started sending out everything, and then everything collapsed. So I'm still going to be harassing you for donations for Bike for Chai. And I'm not wearing the political shirt. The hat. I'm wearing the Rush hat in honor of the late great Neil Peart, who sadly died this year, not of COVID, of brain cancer. So, Dave said 2016 was his first year. So this is going to be his 6th year. It's going to be my 3rd year. So, in any case, so to review what we discussed the other day briefly, the CARES Act, and I'm going to, here, give me 1 second to quickly close out that. Look at this bill here. I don't know, can anybody read this small type on your screen? Or is that too small? It's probably too small. Basically, this is the language of the CARES Act as it regards forbearance of mortgages and a total moratorium on evictions. So, reviewing what we went over the other day. The CARES Act forbids landlords who have a loan which is backed by the federal government, which, in general, that's going to be all loans. Not some, but all mortgages are going to be covered by this. There's a very, very few, I'm getting waves from all sorts of people. I'm getting very, very few landlords who are saying, yeah, we know that our loan is in fact not federally insured. Most tend to be. In the old days, when I was in the mortgage business in the early 90s, it was a very large chunk of the market, what was called non-conforming. Much of that ends up nowadays getting packaged and bought, and it ends up being in some manner insured by the federal government. I don't know this for sure, but I believe a lot of that had to do with after the 2008 meltdown. The federal government just goes in and insures more stuff, for better or for worse. In this case, for us, it's for worse. For the banks, it's for the better. It's because the banks can rely on the federal government to insure their investments so they never have a loss. All they have is a gain. So in any case, we're forbidden for 120 days. Now, the exact date, July the 26th, is 121 days after the implementation of this law. Patrick, how's it going? Excellent musician who is now, and Edward is joining. Hello, Edward. Patrick is doing some real estate investment and rehabbing in downtown St. Louis. He shows pictures on Facebook of his jobs and does beautiful work. But I know Patrick from the days when I used to have free time to play music, and I was a marimba player and a percussionist, and sadly have not had time for that. The next few months, sadly, going to have plenty of time, but we're homeschooling kids now, so who has time for anything? In any case, almost every mortgage now, assume that if you have a mortgage and it's with a bank, that is almost certainly going to be applicable to the CARES Act. But if you believe not, and I've had a few clients who've sent me evictions in the last couple days, most of the evictions that I've got here, and you can see on the screen all this stuff, these are cases that are all just on hold because they all are covered by some sort of a CARES Act applicable situation. So in any case, the language of the act says, as long as it's a covered dwelling, which for your purposes, any mortgage, unless you are 100% sure it is not federally backed, or in any property that has some sort of a federal program, which would be Section 8 for you. For most of my clients, that's the only federal program we tend to see. So if you do intend to file an eviction, I've sent everybody with as an attachment to the April 2nd email, an affidavit, and I've had a few of those come in. I've got a couple of cases waiting here, which I just sent messages out to clients saying, hey, I still need the affidavit. And a side note, for most of you who are watching, most of you kind of know my system and have done it before, we do need the stuff to be uploaded by PDF. So when you go into add evictions, just to do briefly, you put in the name and information, and then when you go forward to the page 3, which is the upload, I did have someone who uploaded me Word documents. I see it. I can download it, but I really prefer everything kind of gets easier on my end if you could do PDF. Everything should always be PDF documents. But I did send that person a note along with a request for the affidavit. I will not file any cases during the eviction moratorium without that affidavit. And I still don't know. We've submitted a couple. They have yet to be accepted by the court. They were done earlier this week. Everything is slowed down. Clerks are taking days off alternately, so they're all working about half time. Then as far as when we could restart doing it, as I said, July 26th. There's language in the bill that says there's another 30 days. We cannot order somebody to vacate for a date sooner than 30 days after the termination. So 30 days from July 26th be August 25th. So we can't say you must be out because of your non-payment by August 25th. I don't think that last language is remotely relevant in the state of Missouri because we are not telling people to that. Oh, and I'm being told. Give me 1 second, Howard. I'm going to point that out. That's a good point. we are not in Missouri telling people you've got to get out before we file an eviction. So we file the eviction, I'm saying on July 26th. I don't know what's going to happen. We're just going to have to see. And Howard is an attorney in New York, and he does some evictions in New York. So what he said is you might add, when you say virtually every mortgage, that virtually, I got to click to see more, sorry. This happened last time. Click to see more, and I can't seem to, there we go. What he said is virtually every mortgage, that virtually every institutional mortgage, he says, this is Howard Rabin, I add this because certainly purchase money mortgages and many private mortgages would not be federally insured. So, yes, private money mortgages are not applicable. I pointed out on the April 3rd online meeting we did like this, I have a client who's, of the 300 properties he manages, about 220 are for other clients as a property manager. My cousin Andrew, how are you doing, Andrew? The 80 properties that are his own portfolio, he has all of them with a completely private lender. It is 100% private. There's no banks involved. He's going forward. He sent me a case yesterday or the day before when I was shut down for the last days of Passover. And if he is watching here, I don't believe he is, but if he's watching, that'll get filed today or later. I've got a message here from, very good question. I don't believe we covered this last time. So this is Edward. I'm going to just keep that open there for a second. Pardon me, folks. Got to blow my nose. Just dust. This is not COVID. I am not infected, at least as far as I know. So, Mr. Kennedy, how are you, sir? He is watching. So, last time we didn't really much discuss writs of execution. What I would say is that the courts are totally closed. Now, for those here in St. Louis market, if you haven't caught the news and you didn't see my rant on Facebook, which caused a chain reaction kind of screaming match between some folks, and I believe Kyle Gilbertson is watching. I'm not sure if Laurent Gray is watching. You guys stop fighting each other. There's just no point. Nobody has ever convinced anybody of anything on Facebook, ever. That's why a few years ago, I completely stopped. I've kept to it almost entirely. I've completely stopped any political postings on Facebook. Why? Because it's pointless. Nobody cares. In any case, I did post this morning because it's relevant, or last night. It is relevant to my business. It is relevant to my community, that Sam Page, who is the county executive of St. Louis County, and Lita Cruson, the horrible mayor of St. Louis City, they are both kind of horrible. They both have decided, and apparently the timeline, I was shut down for the last days of Passover, but before the president came out with the plan to kind of reopen the country, St. Louis City and County mayor and county executive, respectively, who those two people are, after the governor of Missouri, the most powerful positions in the state of Missouri. Okay, really important people, because St. Louis County is the economic engine that drives the state of Missouri. No offense to anybody outside of St. Louis County here in Missouri, but realistically, this is the reality. St. Louis City is not the engine. And a new client wants to hire us. Can you talk? Hold on. Online meeting right now, can't. Okay. So, and my cousin Amy. How are you, Amy? So the mayor and the county exec both extended the stay-at-home order. Right now, they're saying till mid-May in St. Louis County, but it's open-ended. We're going to just look at it in mid-May. I mean, personally, I'm terrified by this. I believe that we are facing economic catastrophe, the likes of which this country has never seen. Never. Not when we got hit at Pearl Harbor. Never. So the reality is that if we're shut down for another full month, who knows what's going to happen? Okay, most of you generally know this. I don't know what's going to happen, but currently, Edward, to answer your question up here, that we have writs that were filed. So I'm sitting on a whole bunch of writs, and I could show, if we look at the filed writs here, which will take a second to load, the issue with writs of execution is that we bring them to the sheriff of each county, and then we have to wait for them to give us a date and a time for set out. And we usually get those in St. Louis County, we get them within a business day, okay? And then most of you clients know we're dealing with usually a 1 week out to get sheriff executions done. During this time, what we've had is that 1 week got stretched to a couple of weeks because things were a little delayed, and then they just flat out canceled everything. So all these executions from this Chris Banfield case all the way up to the top, these are all ones which had been scheduled and are now on hold. They're on hold till the sheriffs reopen, Edward. That is the answer. We have no idea, and most of these will probably have to be refiled. In the city, they told me a couple of weeks ago, the sheriff's office told me that they're going to go ahead and continue with the same executions, and we won't have to refile them, so there won't be an additional fee. St. Louis County, I believe, is going to say, they're all expired, we got to refile them, okay? Which means I will have to pass along just the hard cost of the writ, which is $40. It's officially $36 plus the little fee. So you're gonna get charged. If I have to be charged again, you're gonna get charged, but no additional legal fees. There are no additional legal fees for any of the work, and I'm doing, frankly, a ton more work, but at the same time, I don't have much in the way of new work. What does this mean for me? It's terrible times for me. It's terrible times for everybody. I am not going to have new billables to speak of for a total of probably 5 months. I expect there to be a shit ton of evictions, from the end of July for several months. I'll do fine, God willing. I don't think that, this is going to put me out of business in any way, shape, or form. But it's going to be lean for a few months. I did apply to the payroll protection. By the way, totally separate issue. For anybody, yes, Daniel, I agree. What a mess. For anybody who has not filed yet the PPP, it might be too late. Now, we're hoping that Congress is going to re-up this. And Yasmin, you asked about St. Charles County. They're also shut down. I don't remember what St. Charles County executive said. If anybody knows, please jump in and let me know what the shutdown stay-at-home order in St. Charles County looks like. Right now, everything's shut down. I'm not calling it sheriffs because... sorry, go ahead.
Matt, this is Stacy with
Hey.
Gage, and I have a question. When they're talking about when they start the wheel back up with the writs, and whether it is new evictions, well, let's go back to writs.
Yeah.
So you have all these people that work. We have writs. We have some at Edgemont Crossing, and this is St. Louis County. So
Right.
when they start that back up and you have to refile, do you actually? Have they given any indication of whether it's just going to be, okay, you can't pay, or do you see it where they're going to be able to come in and whine and cry and plead their case that they're not going to be able to leave?
That's a very good question. And again, I'm glad for this question because it's covering new territory we didn't cover last time. Much of this is total guesswork on my part, but there's law. There's law that is being completely overturned and ignored by stay-at-home orders and capricious whim of county executives or presiding justices, presiding judge of various counties. And this is not lawful. Now, I'm not saying this to ignore the severity of the disease. It's another conversation. But what is happening now does not conform with the law of the state of Missouri or any state. I can't speak to New York, and Howard, if you're still watching, I don't know what New York is doing. Whatever it is, I'm sure it's much worse from the perspective of the landlord. But the issue is there's first there was an order from the presiding judge of St. Louis County, which took your writs here and said the sheriff may not do their job. But wait a second, we have a court order that says you must leave the house. The only way for that to be enforced is having the sheriff come. We've paid our fee. We've submitted the proper document. There's no reason we should be waiting. They're saying because of this disease, the landlord has to suck it. That's a problem. So, and my wife is watching. Hello. Everybody is home board. In any case, the problem here is what do we do? What do we do? We're also asked the question: do we usually get a consent judgment anyway if the tenants show up to court? Yeah, we're trying to get consent judgments now. To my knowledge, I'm the only eviction attorney currently who is trying to get consent judgments done during this shutdown. Everybody else seems to be just kind of hanging out and waiting. We're trying to contact everybody on all of our dockets that were missed. Since the March 19th docket forward, and basically that's all I've got my staff doing, is calling people and trying to get consent judgments. Because even if we can't enforce these consent judgments, we at least have a judgment. We at least have a case that's now off the books. But going back to the issue of the writs, Edward and Stacy, we have writs that by law they're supposed to be taken care of. But side note, our cases that we're filing should be taken care of. Statutorily, within 30 days, we should be in court. What does that mean? That means that these shutdown orders are saying basically the law doesn't matter. Okay? We all get it. The whole world gets it. Everything's on hold. For those of you whose tenants are doing the right thing and paying their rent even during this time, you'll be okay. There's always that group of non-payers. Some clients it's 2%, some clients it's 10%. It depends on the neighborhood, whatnot. There's always that group. And those are people not necessarily who don't work. Those are people who just don't manage their money well. But we now are going to have this group of 10%, 20, 30% people who never were late on their rent who are now going into the eviction status. The courts have to enforce the law. But if the courts get backed up, there's nothing they can do. So Howard just responded to what I had said. He said there's a 90-day moratorium on evictions in New York State, which is in concurrence with the federal rule. But my guess is because he didn't qualify that, is that moratorium is on all evictions, which is a problem. New York State has the right to do that only, if it's passed by the assembly and signed by the governor, because there's a law in New York State. There's a law in Missouri. There's a law in every state about evictions. Now, they have not done that in Missouri. God willing, they won't. Because again, I would not have such a problem with this if they had simply done one thing, put one sentence in this law, okay? Which, if we look at this article, they even pointed out the ProPublica, which is a kind of consumer-oriented journal publication. They said there's no provision in here that the person actually have lost their job. Okay, they also point out in this article something that we discussed at length last time, which is there's no penalties. So by New York State putting in an eviction moratorium, you simply can't file an eviction. But why? If the person works for Amazon, why? If they're not paying their rent and they have a job, forget Amazon. I mean, I'm bringing that up because Amazon, Jeff Bezos is going to be richer than God's richer uncle, He's making more money than ever before. More and more small businesses, small retailers are never coming back after this because of the shutdown, because the government is not trusting you all to keep your distance. And there was a big article, I think it was in the Journal a few days ago about this is because of the high trust, low trust. Sweden's a very high trust society, and they can be trusted, I guess, to keep their distance without destroying their economy. They're staying open, but apparently the Swedes can be trusted by their government not to be dumbasses. Apparently, we Americans cannot. And Howard points out that's correct. It applies to residential and commercial rents. And it's an executive order by the governor. I guess the governor, by executive fiat in the state of New York, can do whatever the bleeping hell he wants and override state law. He's a Cuomo. He's going to do whatever he wants anyway. No love for the guy. I just was turned on the news briefly before this went on, and I heard him bitching that the federal government's demanding that the states do all these things, and basically he's saying they're all unfunded mandates. He said, we got zero from the federal government. $0. Okay. Times are tough all over, Mr. Cuomo. But, you also didn't do your job. Much of the problems were caused because nobody was doing their jobs. Okay? Vis-a-vis a potential huge breakout of a virus like this. But again, now let me sidetrack politics for a moment. This is biowarfare. Period. Dot. This is biowarfare committed on us by China, whether it was purposely set out of their lab in Wuhan or if it was, and Kyle, I'll answer your question in a moment, or if it was accidentally released from the lab in Wuhan or it was purposefully pushed out. They are designing bigger and badder viruses in that lab. That lab, which, by the way, gets millions of dollars from the American government. Why? Because government is corrupt. All government is corrupt. And I'm certainly not laying this on our current administration. I'm laying it on all administrations. Why are we sending any money to a Wuhan lab to study virus, to let the Chicoms, the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, why are they getting our money to make worse viruses, weapons, bioweapons? This is insanity. Total insanity. Kyle says, will the tenant's name go into Mo CaseNet if you file, or is that put on hold? The tenants will have no place to go if, other landlords are doing their background checks. So, Kyle, you are correct. So here's the thing. Most of my clients, and I urge all clients, and Kyle, I'm not sure, I don't know have I done cases for you? I know you've been on the Facebook a while, but I don't recall if we've done cases for you. But in any case, whether you're a client or not, anybody who files a case during this time against someone, if you say to me, hey, they're late on just their April rent, and, they lost their job for, COVID, fuck them. That's not cool. I don't recommend that. I've recommended, and I say to everybody, and when I was interviewed by some media over the last few weeks, local Fox affiliate, a couple of newspapers, the AP, the Post-Disappointment, and most recently, One American News Network. I've said that my clients are trying to do right by folks. You all, please, do right by folks. There is no reason to be a bastard about this, even though, yes, you need the money. Many landlords, not all, I don't know if it's most, but many landlords can weather the delay in some of this rent as long as there's something rational to it. If the person, in fact, has lost their job due to this, Joe Pagano, how are you, is watching. The landlords who can weather this, please work with folks. If they, in fact, have lost their job, in fact, and there's nothing wrong with saying to them, hey, show me some proof. And that's what I wanted the law to say. All I wanted in this law, if we look back at the law, is to say that after covered dwelling, that a covered defendant, a covered tenant, is someone who in fact makes a showing that they've lost their job or had a massive decrease in income. Because somebody pointed out to me that their employees, she tried to list for me what the approximate salary was, but because the $600 a week additional is coming on top of the regular unemployment check, that total, in fact, is more than her employees were earning before they were laid off. They're earning more. Now, does that mean this is great times for them? No, this is terrible times for them. They're stuck at home with their kids who are supposed to be in school, and there's all kinds of hardship for everybody. Everybody knows that. But if in fact they haven't lost their job, or they've lost their job, but their unemployment check and the $1,200 check presumably has come, and everything else added together covers it, why the hell are you not paying your landlord? That's what unemployment is for. And if they're not, we have a problem. And that's what should be changed in this law. Will it be? I doubt it, but maybe, who knows? I'm hopeful. But there's nothing we could do. Likewise, with the New York law that Mr. Rabin pointed out, if I scroll back, it applies to both residential and commercial rents, and it is an executive order for a 90-day moratorium on all evictions. So that now covers all evictions in New York State, not just those that CARES Act covers. CARES Act is only covering things that the federal government has a say on, which is any tenant in a property secured by a loan that is some way insured by the federal government. So institutional loans, Fannie, Freddie, et cetera, FHA, whatnot. So Kyle, back to your question. Will the tenant's name go on CaseNet? So for those of you who don't know, the moment you file an eviction against a defendant, the moment I get it on CaseNet, usually within a couple of hours. Right now, it's within a few days, they're clicking a button which just says accept case. That gives it a case number. The moment it has a case number, that case shows up on CaseNet. Okay? And yes, landlords are going to look askance at that, because most landlords do look at CaseNet to see, do you have any evictions? And you look and you say, wait a second, you're in the middle of an eviction. What the hell? You want me to give you a place, but you're being evicted from your old place? Now, in a small number of those cases, the tenant says, hey, you have no idea. I'm with the worst landlord. I've got this slumlord, and here's the proof. I had a year of hell with this guy, and maybe they're like, okay, but if it's just for non-payment, you're gonna have a problem. During this time, I don't know what landlords are going to do. I don't know what you all are going to do. Are you going to say, hey, we're simply don't care. We are going to keep to our regular standards for tenants. I don't know if you're going to keep occupancy. And we're talking about a whole range of properties. We have single family residence landlords with properties that are from, low end all the way to very high end, and you have apartment complexes that are really inexpensive, $500 a month, downtown St. Louis, kind of sketchy areas, all the way to really nice apartment complexes with really good folks who normally have really good jobs. And a lot of those really good jobs are vanishing. Okay? That's what we heard in the news this past week is that we went from layoffs from hourly workers to layoffs from doctors and lawyers. My wife is sitting at home. Her dental practice is closed. 13 or 12 offices, I don't know. Everybody's home. There's one office open 2 or 3 days a week for emergencies only that they kind of all share. Everything is closed. Whatever check might be coming into her is so much lower than what her normal income is. Nobody should be crying for me. We should be crying for the country. Because when you have doctors and dentists and engineers and all the way down to bartenders and truck drivers and everybody who is suffering, then what are we going to do? What are we going to do? How are we going to get through this? Now, for the landlords, you're probably going to be changing your criteria for new tenants. You're going to have new tenants who have evictions now, recent evictions, and you're going to take them. Why? Because you have to. Because everybody's going to have an eviction on their record. There's no way around it. But there's also no way other than the eviction process. So for anybody who's watching who's not a landlord and doesn't get why it's so important, why am I so intense about having the ability to file evictions, is because it's one of enforcement. There is only one way to enforce. There are two ways to enforce an eviction. There's the legal way, two ways to enforce a lease and rental payment, which is what we're talking about. We're not talking about other rental issues, because those are not part of the CARES Act. If your tenant shoots up the place, let's talk. We still file an eviction. We're talking about, drug dealing, this, that, the other thing, having unlawful residence, etc. But for non-payment of rent, there's two ways to enforce it. There's the legal way and the illegal way. There's the lawsuit route, evictions, and there's Tony Soprano. Those are the only two ways, okay? And doing it with the baseball bat like Tony Soprano is not recommended. I don't recommend it. Please don't do that. You will go to jail. And you should, okay? The only way to, shalom, is watching. So the only way to enforce the payment of rent is with first the threat of an eviction suit, then the filing of an eviction suit, and most often simply getting a consent judgment that we then work off of, with the threat of, if you don't make the payments according to the consent judgment, we'll bring the sheriff in. Okay? In some states, it's called a marshal, whatever. That you need to be able to hold the threat of the eviction over the tenant, or else you don't get your rent. Now, if we lived in a society where everybody was unscrupulously honest and ready, willing, and able to pay all their obligations, then we wouldn't need evictions. Frankly, we wouldn't need written contracts. Okay? But we don't live in such a world. That's why we have courts. And at base, our entire government boils down to one thing. Our entire system of law, everything boils down to enforcement of contracts. I may have said this the last time. It's enforcement of a social contract, enforcement of the Constitution, which sets forth the basic contract between the citizens and the government. Okay? Limitations, the Bill of Rights are limitations on the federal government. What we can and cannot do as a federal government, what the government can and cannot do. We, the people, are the government. But what the federal government is forbidden to do is much of what the Bill of Rights sets forth. Okay? Are they allowed to stop the gathering at a church? Important thing. Because we had people in California yesterday, I read right after I came back up, and being shut down without the news during these times is maddening to somebody like me who's such a news junkie. But, I get the Wall Street Journal at the house. I read that every morning. And then when the holiday ended late yesterday evening, I go online and I see all, I'm thinking, okay, what's collapsed now? Every day is new disaster. California, they had police raid a church with guns to arrest people for gathering to worship. If this does not shock people, then you're incapable of being shocked or simply don't know basic civics. Yes, there's a stay-at-home order. But can that stay-at-home order be more than a suggestion? Is it legal to keep people from gathering to worship? I don't know. Now, maybe the church was wrong. My rabbis here in St. Louis would say yes. The rabbis here in the Orthodox community of St. Louis have issued a rabbinic order, which has no force of law for Missouri law. It has no force of anything except for those of us who try to follow the rules that we follow. And it's very rare. This is weird times, but the rabbis came out with a very strong statement saying, do not go gather at the synagogues. All the synagogues are closed. Allow 1, 2, 3 to present. Sure. Oh, it went off. Somebody must have clicked that by accident. I still don't know who number 1, 2, 3 is. But the order said, not only are we not having services, the synagogues are basically closed. They are closed. But they also said, don't allow your kids or your family, everybody was going to travel for Passover holiday. None of that. Do not bring them in. And by the way, they were so strong about it that the rabbi of the Aguda put out a voicemail that he asked to be sent basically publicly, which much of the Jewish community heard, which said, listen, if you don't obey this rule, don't come to me asking, religious questions. Don't come to me asking about whether or not this is good or that is good in the future, because if you're not willing to listen on this, then obviously you don't care what we have to say. This is a serious time. This is very serious stuff. Now, I had a little battle on Facebook this morning because I posted the article about the county executive, and I believe at a certain point we just have to reopen. That's my personal belief. I'm not a doctor. I'm looking at the numbers, and the numbers seem that initially they were overblown, and now we're seeing numbers that are much more in line with the annual flu. And we haven't overloaded, outside of New York, we haven't overloaded our hospitals. We're not even close. So I don't know what the situation is going to be. Les, how's it going, Josh? So, we're in a very weird time, but the government, does it have the right to do this? So going back to what Stacy was talking about and what was asked about the writs of execution by Edward earlier, the state government, whether it's correct or not, and it could be overturned at some point by work by lawyers in appeals, which no eviction lawyer is going to do this. Nobody ever appeals these things. Virtually ever appeals these things. The only ones who ever appeal and make some law lately are when the legal services guys, the legal aid guys do appeals, Arch City Defenders, Legal Services of Eastern Missouri. And that's where some law recently has been made because they have the resources, because they're not working for people who are paying their bill. They're on either the public dime or donated dime as advocates for tenants. But in general, landlords just want to get rid of people. If it's an eviction case, you just want to get rid of them. And you know what? We don't want a big fight. Okay, well, let's just figure something out and be done with it. We don't want to go to an appeals court. So the fact of the government shutting down the eviction process, who's going to take that to the courts? I don't know. Maybe there's something in progress that I don't know about, but I don't see it being successful. Nobody's going to take that up right now and say that the prime, importance has to be respected to be able to kick people out of their homes right now during all this. I don't think anybody's going to do that. Even if it's just to take up my, kind of pet peeve about this, to say somebody has to make a showing that they've actually been detrimentally affected by the shutdown. People are being detrimentally affected. Make no mistake. I am. You guys are. Everybody is. There are some people who aren't. If you work for the post office, are you still delivering the mail? Yes. Now, the post office is talking about going bankrupt. Every few years you hear about this. The United States Postal Service has problems. It's also a constitutionally mandated function of the federal government. It has to stay in business. Now, at some point, snail mail, may just be completely obsolete. Maybe it should be already. But at this point, the mails are still being delivered. And the Postal Service workers are still getting paid. And that money still has the exact same value it had in March 1st, long before this shutdown started. So far, our currency is not being devalued. Interest rates are still zero. What's going to happen? Who knows? China, as part of its bioweapon attack on the world, wants the yuan to be considered the prime world currency that everybody bases off of. It's not likely to happen. But this is part and parcel of why this is a bioterror attack, bioweapon attack, an act of war, biological warfare by China against the whole effing world. Now, Howard just put in a note here. He said, I've been saying the same thing as you. In my opinion, short of the president or the governor of a respective state declaring martial law, neither federal nor state government has the authority to obviate the U.S. or state constitution. Correct. You say it well, Howard. They cannot prohibit the right to peacefully assemble or to worship in accordance with the religious tenets of their faith. Correct. And also, they can't simply erase the eviction laws. Getting back to our core, purpose here. But of course they can't. And look at all the states which are seeking to curtail our most important fundamental Second Amendment rights. I'm sorry. They will take the guns off my cold, dead body. It's not going to happen. Not in Missouri. Now, states like New York, Howard, where you live, already do not have the Second Amendment. For all intents and purposes, it's gone. But Trump, to his credit, said, gun stores are vital. I forget what the word was. They are necessary during this time. Food stores are necessary. Gun stores are necessary. You're going to take away our right to defend ourselves? Now, Steve just posted something. Let's get back to evictions. Stephanie, hey back. And Avi is watching. So, Steve Missler, have a tenant I want out. Utilities are not on. So, Keith Pendleton, Reverend, how are you, sir? Reverend or pastor? Don't remember which. But Steve's question is, he has a tenant he wants out, the utilities are not on. So Steve, you can still evict. What you need to do is you need to, and this goes for everybody, if there is a lease violation, which having the utilities disconnected, whether it be for non-payment or whatever, it's always for non-payment. I mean, in a rare instant, utilities are disconnected because of a lease or a leak or something. So if the utilities are disconnected because of something that landlord did, different story. But if you turn the premises over to tenant with utilities on, check your lease. There should be a provision in the lease, and it better be in there. There should be a provision in the lease that says it is mandatory that tenant keep the utilities on. Now, they must have been turned off back some months ago because I had thought that Ameren and Laclede Gas, rather Spire, are not turning off utilities during this time. Okay, so if in fact they've turned off the utilities, then yes, number one, you can ask University City to condemn the property, but why get the city involved? Because that's going to land you in a problem with U City. Just simply send them, there's a beep. I don't know. Oh, does somebody want to make a comment? Okay. But in fact, if it's been off for a while, you could simply send them a letter of termination of the lease. Now, terminations, so everybody knows, quick review, terminations should always be in writing. Sorry, it was just tapping on denying a phone call. And they must be posted and served. Okay? So Steve, send a process server out there. You could do it yourself if you want to. Make sure the termination sets forth you are being terminated for cause. And you could list non-payment of rent, but also list you have failed to maintain the utilities on and other things. Okay? And then terminate the tenancy. And then we could file an unlawful detainer after the 30-day termination. If your lease allows for a shorter termination period, lease is expired, Section 8 quit paying. Again, Section 8 quit. That's another lease violation. ideally you would have filed the eviction before the March 27th institution of this. Now, is the property applicable? Go through, find out, does the property apply? Does the issue of the CARES Act apply to this property? If there's no loan on it, you're fine. It was Section 8, so the CARES Act would apply. But you can even file right away for non-payment of rent as long as CARES Act does not apply. Okay, you could file it, but it's going to take a while before the courts reopen to get things going. But I've recommended to everybody, if you have cases that CARES Act does not apply, get them filed. Why? It's not so I can get cases. I do want cases. I want to be able to earn a living. But it's because there's going to be a queue. There's going to be a queue that's so long we can't even imagine. We've never had anything like this. Certainly not in the time that I've done this. Probably not ever. We're used to a queue at the end of the year where we might get bumped a week or two in a court docket. But Kyle asks whether their process servers are still working. Mine are. What's an essential worker? I mean, I am considered an essential worker according to the original order that was promulgated by the presiding judge of St. Louis County, is that attorneys who have either a fiduciary or ethical obligation to their clients are allowed to work. I believe I fall under that. Now, I sit in this office. There was a beep. I don't know whose car that is. Somebody with a Kia is parked diagonal in front of my building. Whatever. But the process servers are working for an attorney. I have an ethical obligation. Kyle, if you send me an eviction, I have an ethical obligation to you to file it. Now, process servers are not going out with new cases because summonses are not being issued. Okay? Susanna, how are you? And Alana, hi. So, nevertheless, with a termination, if you have to terminate. So, Steve Missler, going back to your question, if you can't file a rent in possession because there's a note on the property that's probably federally insured, if there's some kind of a mortgage, then you have to terminate and you have to serve that termination. And after the 30-day termination, unless your lease calls for a shorter termination, after that 30-day termination, then we could file an unlawful detainer. Okay? So you would have to send out that way. Now, Heath points out Kansas has a Preservation of Religious Freedom Act, which a lot of states have, which protects religious services. However, it also allows for my finger is, again, not working on this, see more. I don't know what else it says, but because I can't tap on it. But, there is a Religious Freedom Preservation Act, which might have an exception for, your standard acts of God. I don't know which would win ultimately in a Supreme Court battle over whether or not the government is permitted, according to all of what's going on with COVID, from whether the government can stop the gathering for religious worship. I mean, two of the tenets of the First Amendment are that, Congress shall make no law respecting, the establishment of religion, okay? They cannot prevent you from worship. They cannot prevent you from gathering. And is COVID a good reason to say that the Bill of Rights are just suspended? That's dangerous territory, my friends. That's dangerous territory. Because if the Bill of Rights is only good when there's not a medical disaster, biowarfare by the Chinese Communist Party, then there is no Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights is applicable at all times, always. And it says in the Kansas Act that the state can intervene if it conflicts with state interests. Well, then your Religious Freedom Preservation Act of Kansas means jack all. Okay, Heath? Then that Kansas law means nothing if it can intervene if it conflicts with the state interests. What use is a law that specifically says there's religious freedom preservation so long as it doesn't conflict with the state's interests. What's the state's interest? Well, state's interest is whatever the hell the state government says it is. So I don't know who the governor in Kansas is right now. Allow Ryan to join. Allow. Hello, Ryan. Which Ryan is this? So speak up, Ryan. I don't know who you are, but because I know more than one Ryan. And Lindsay is watching. Hello, Lindsay. And Jessica. Hi. So basically, we've gone far afield from evictions, but can the government do this? Can the governor of Missouri or the county executive of St. Louis County, how can the county executive basically suspend state law? Where does he have that right? Well, he's saying he doesn't have that right. He's just for the safety of everybody, putting things on hold, telling the sheriffs they can't do their job. And we can't go there on our own. We can't evict. We can't enforce Tony Soprano style. We talked about that. And we got the governor of Kansas is Laura Kelly. Never heard of her. So thank you, Gail. I've never heard of her. Presumably she's a great gal. I don't know. Governor of Missouri is kind of sort of a non-entity. I met him once briefly. I'd much prefer to have Greitens back. He was, wrongly forced to resign by the most corrupt prosecutor the state of Missouri has ever seen, Kim Gardner, who needs to go to jail. She is a horrifically corrupt, terrible prosecutor who just regularly basically gives the finger to the people of the state of Missouri and her own city of St. Louis. But she's a creature of George Soros, who was put into office by George Soros money. So what do you expect? But does not include, so Heath continues to say, if it conflicts with state interests but does not include the federal government, for sure, because the Kansas law can't speak to the federal government, Heath. But the state is basically saying, oh, look at that. So St. Charles is issuing summonses right now. Les is an attorney, does evictions, and apparently St. Charles is issuing cases. Now, I have cases that I'm filing. They're all St. Louis County. I think one city case. I don't have any. I have one here in this list, but this one has to wait because the CARES Act applies. Now, Les, call me after we're done with this. I'd love to get you a copy of the affidavit I've been talking about. I gave my clients an affidavit, and I'm filing new cases with an affidavit stating to the court the CARES Act does not apply. I know that my judge in the county is going to want to have like a reason why he should do a case during the eviction moratorium that the federal government has declared. And I find that, the judges need some hand-holding on this. So, but yeah, you've got all the way out to June 15th. What do they care? What do the courts care? What do they care about the 30-day statutory requirement? They don't care. And everything is just hanging out there now. So, Donnie Wexler, how are you, sir? Someone who's, I believe, still living in New York City. I hope you're doing okay. Are you still living in New York, Donnie? If you are, stay safe, my friend. Stay safe. I got some pushback when I sent out a Facebook post this morning or last night, and I was saying, hey, we need to reopen, and we need to reopen now. And I got a lot of pushback, so I'm going to go see what they had said about this. So I said, we need to reopen now. I mean, so far, at least yesterday, the article I saw yesterday said that Missouri lost 133 people. That's a tragedy. 133 people dead are terrible. We don't want anybody to die. But the problem is that people die. Diseases happen, diseases spread. But this has probably spread so much and so far already that the numbers we're talking about are wrong. The mortality numbers we know were never what they were. Now, Ariel, though, pointed out that it's way, way worse than the flu. Hospitals are overwhelmed. Keep your mortality rate low for longer. But he's living in Manhattan. Okay, Ariel Fishman is living in Manhattan. He's saying it's horrible in New York. This is not New York. Some other states have not shut down at all. There's no reason for a state like North Dakota to shut down. It was North or South Dakota that just straight up said, no. They basically said what Sweden said is, we trust our people, keep your distance. But they also don't have, an urban landscape like New York City, St. Louis City. People here seem to be obeying the shutdown order, the stay-at-home order. Okay? Most people, our stores that are open are limiting, one person per household come into the supermarket. And no kids, and trying to keep it from spreading. But there's a point where we have to reopen, or else we're just going to have such catastrophic destruction. I'm sorry, poverty is going to kill more people than COVID-19, than the Chinese bioweapon. So, but the Chinese Communist Party did a very good job here. They did a fantastic job. They are destroying the entire world economy with one bug that they designed in the Wuhan lab, one of two labs. We don't know which one. Okay. Probably the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which gets American taxpayer dollars. And it's the same lab that was connected with the Harvard professor. I believe he was the chair of a department of biology or biochemistry of Harvard University, was walked out in handcuffs, according to an article back in early February. Walked out in handcuffs by the feds for taking money from the Chinese Communist Party. His research assistants, two of them, Chinese, one a lieutenant in the People's Army. Or a colonel, not sure what position. I mean, this is insanity. These are the people that are dealing with the Chinese, but our government is giving grants to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Now, Kyle points out you're at risk walking around downtown St. Louis at nighttime on any day before the virus came. Of course you are. You're at risk of crime. You're at risk of all kinds of things. Right now, my assistant, Courtney, told me that there is basically a tent city near the courts on Market and Tucker there, by the angled parking where I always park for court downtown. Homeless were always there in small numbers, but now it's like a tent city apparently. Okay. The police are not enforcing, and the courts, because the courts are not enforcing. Now, some of you have come to me with problems where tenant is just causing a massive amount of problems, which we need to file unlawful detainers. They are not accepting them. The courts are not accepting them. And they're not enforcing anything. And what do the police normally say in these situations? It's a civil matter. Well, sorry, officer, there are no civil matters now. The civil courts are closed. The civil has been disbanded. So if you don't arrest this guy and get him out of here, but he lives here, too bad. So what are we doing? We have problems where people are being terrorized in one apartment complex by somebody. There's nothing I can do about it. My client's now gone to get orders of protection for the landlord. Their son is a tenant in one of the units in the building. And then other tenants were afraid to go to court to get an order of protection against this guy because they're afraid of the guy. They don't want to put their name on any court filing. This is terrible. It's only going to get worse. And when we don't have enforcement by courts, going back to what I was saying, the courts are here. The government is here to enforce contract. That's all it's about. Enforcement of contract. That is government's primary sole function. One contract is with the American people that they will say, for example, keep a border. That's why they protect our border. It's their contract with the American people to protect our border. It's the contract with the American people to take care of their health. But really, that's not necessarily a function of the federal government. Right now, they're doing it anyway. Okay, that's fine. We've all accepted long since that, Department of Health and Human Services is a function of government, even though it's not quite necessarily constitutional. But that's what that is. So I've been asked by some clients about, what are some do's and don'ts during this time I would say, and I'm going to text one person here real quickly because she was on and then jumped off. And new, give me 1 second, sorry. Sorry. So, in any case, what I've been asked by some clients is like, what do we do during this time? Give us some do's and don'ts. I'm still, this is a kind of a work in progress. This was discussed with me Tuesday, just before I shut down for a couple of days, and I've been kind of going over in my head. I did not have time last night to get this down in writing, but I will, and over the weekend, I hope to get something out to everyone who's a user on my system as kind of a more coherent statement. But some of the things you should do, some of the things you should not do during this time, okay? Definitely, whatever you do, I would keep kind of mass email or mail communications to clients that in any way smack of kind of going hard on people for rent collection at this time. I would not put that in writing. You don't want to be in the news. Okay, one of my clients already got that. Maintenance and repairs by landlord. I'm not quite sure, Les, what your question is, but give me a second. Write something a little more specific. But for example, one of my clients, unfortunately, came out with a statement that seems to have gone away. Nobody's like still harping on it, but they wrote it in a way that wasn't great. What you need to do is just speak to people on an individual basis. But at the same time, I've been getting clients who are like, nobody is answering the phone. You can still post something on their door. What I would do, the most important thing during this time is if you have a communication, everything should be, even if you're going to be tough with them, be nice in writing, okay? Dear tenants, we understand these are difficult times. We understand you're stuck at home. We're all working through it. We have our offices closed and we have limited services. We've closed the pool. We've closed the common areas. But we're here for you. If there's a repair to be made, call us. We are doing emergency repairs, but be advised. And this is something, I'm going back to something I had a conversation with a client. They're having all kinds of stopped up toilets because people are stuck at home and they're using it more and they're not being as careful. And you say, by the way, keep a plunger handy because stopped up toilets are not getting addressed as fast as normal because Roto-Rooter's backed up 3-4 days. And it's going to be on you if we find paper towels stuffed down into the commode. It's going to be on you if, even if you couldn't find toilet paper at the store and you're making do with something much worse. Don't put it down the toilet. That's disgusting, but you have to. Now, again, this is not something I would get into detail in a letter, but say, we're working, we're doing our best, and we're willing to work with people. And you could even qualify it. Those of you who have been fired or laid off or furloughed by COVID-19, please come talk to us. Call us at these numbers, email us. We are willing to talk with you. We're available by a Zoom meeting, by FaceTime, et cetera, and we're willing to work with you. Those of you, you can also say, just basically be nice. Don't be hard asses, even if you want to be. Even if people are taking advantage of you. Now, if you're in the conversation with them and they say, well, we need 2 months of free rent. I'm sorry, we're not giving free rent. You don't need to do that. Okay? And now somebody just texted saying if tenants are not paying rent, repairs are optional for the landlord. Incorrect. Incorrect, and you'll get yourself in problems with that. 100% incorrect. You must do repairs even if they're not paying the rent. Now, you can prioritize things, but only to a point. We're getting into the warm weather. if somebody's a total shitbag and they're not paying their rent, but their AC goes out, you still got to fix the AC. Sorry, the joy of being a landlord. Now, Les asks specifically, should landlords be offering repairs and maintenance, or do they have the right to not perform? Same question. Sorry, I was reading Kyle's question. Les, no, landlords still have to do repair and maintenance. But it can be, and for most of my clients, they sent out, and in such a letter, you can say, we are sorry, only doing emergency maintenance at this time. We are trying to keep the contact between people, and the contact, our maintenance staff are only going in, when it's absolutely necessary. Okay? So if somebody has an outlet that doesn't work, c'est la vie, as long as it's not a fire hazard, that can wait a month more. But if the AC is out and it gets to be 90 degrees out, we're in that, strange not spring thing that St. Louis doesn't do. You got to fix that. We also might have a freezing night next week. Never know. And if the heat's out, fix it. Got to fix it. If tenants are not paying rent, landlords still have to do repairs. C'est la vie. But that's basically that. Now, as far as these do's and don'ts, emergency only is what I'm seeing. Yeah, emergency only. Correct, Les. An emergency, something that has to do with health and safety. Hi, Amanda, you're back. So we're talking about do's and don'ts. So I do recommend, and I mentioned earlier before you dropped off for a moment, Amanda, I do recommend that any communications be really, I guess, nice. We're willing to work and qualify it. Again, I'm repeating myself. If you have, been fired or furloughed or laid off during this time, and I would even say, and your income has been detrimentally affected. Because, again, I'm going to go back to what I said an hour ago. Someone I know's employees are making more now because of the $600 per week additional that the government decreed. They're making more on unemployment than they do working. Again, I'm not saying that they're not suffering. They're stuck at home with their kids. They can't go shopping. They can't go see a movie. There's all kinds of, first world problems that we're suffering. But they still can pay the damn rent. That's the bottom line. Pay your damn rent. I got quoted on one article. That was one sentence they quoted of mine. It wasn't the only sentence, but that sentence got quoted, and I'm sorry, but I stand by that. If you have not had your income detrimentally affected, pay your damned rent. That's my feeling. Now, maybe I'm a prick and I represent evil landlords. I had a friend, who said something along the lines of, you need to get busy evicting people for those blanking landlords. Push the poor out. I think he's been spending a little too much time in front of Facebook. This is a guy who's in the past, been a small businessman, all kinds of different businesses over the years. He's on insurance brokerages. I don't know, but might have owned rental property in the past. But right now, just spending too much time at home in front of Facebook and watching the country disintegrating, watching our country be destroyed. And that's a comment. And that's why Facebook, it's forever. I don't like it. But the landlords are not seeking to push the poor out. The landlords are necessarily demanding rent because that's the only way you pay the bills. That's the only way you pay for the buildings. Most landlords operate on a margin. There is a margin. It is a business. They invested, some businesses invest capital into large machinery, and they put together widgets which are sold in the marketplace. That's one business model. Another business model are people who invest in a piece of land, and they invest in seeds, put it in the ground, and grow stuff called food. which they may sell in the marketplace, or they may use to feed their animals, which in turn are food, which they sell in the marketplace. Then there are you folks, my landlord clients, who invest their capital in things called houses and buildings, which require maintenance, staff, insurance, taxes. All of these things require rents to be paid. The socialists out there, like the blue states governments, okay, like people like the mayor of St. Louis, the people who don't understand capital, the people who don't understand business, who've never owned a business. Of course, those of you who know me personally know that I have for years said that you are disqualified from high executive office if you've never been a businessman, if you've never owned and run a business, owned or run, okay? Frankly, most of our government, particularly those who sit on the left side of the aisle, have never so much as run a lemonade stand. And if they did, they'd know what it means to meet maybe a payroll. I mean, if you're paying your friends, 20 cents out of each lemonade because they're doing part of the job, then you made a payroll. But most people in government who've spent their life in government don't understand this. Frankly, most people in government are not losing their jobs. And if they get furloughed, they'll get paid in the end. They always do. Whenever there's a government shutdown, they always get paid all the back pay. All of it. So, I will leave this up. By the way, Alexis asked me if I'll leave this recording up. I will most certainly leave it up. So, going back to it, the landlords must get paid for their product. What is their product? The rental of real property. The rental of an apartment or a home or a storefront. By the way, CARES Act does not apply to commercial. You go ahead and evict commercial tenants all you want. However, all the delays from the courts still apply. Like I said, work with people, even commercial tenants. If they're a restaurant and they're shut down, what are you going to do? Work with them. But if they're a Domino's is paying their bill. They're hiring now. I saw a bunch of ads. I was watching some program on Hulu late last night, and there were ads from Domino's. They're hiring, So, if you know people who want a job, send them to Domino's. Angela, how are you? So they cannot continue this long without basically saying that landlords' real property has to be nationalized. That's never going to happen. That's never going to happen. Certainly not with a real estate developer / contractor as president. That's not going to happen. Okay? God willing, he'll be reelected. Right now he's running against senile dementia man. So, who knows what's going to happen. So, any other question? Any other questions? Please throw me some questions on the Facebook, on the join.me.
Hey, Matt, it's Jennifer.
Hey, Jennifer, what's happening?
So I've got nothing good, really.
Nothing good.
Bad landlords who went in arrears about 3 months and worked with tenants, and now because I'm asking for rent, they're not talking to me, and I'm putting the house on the market. So
gotcha. And you're going to be taken to the cleaners. And keep in mind, Jennifer, you're going to be taken to the cleaners by those who have cash to invest. Okay? Because it's a buyer's market now. Right?
Absolutely.
So
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Sorry, I was saying it's a buyer's market now. If you sell now because of this, it's going to be tougher to get your price.
I totally understand that, but I made perfect timing and bought another property and trying to do a reverse 1031, and the
Gotcha.
deadline's the end of August, and they haven't pushed that out. So,
and you got to even watch with and you've got to watch. You folks probably know this as landlords, and I'm not really an investor. I have some real estate. I'm personally just trying to get rid of it. I'm I am not happy as a landlord. I don't want to be a landlord anymore. And most of you who know me know that. But the 1031s, usually you're anchored by some serious store. You get like a Walgreens or something like that. And a Walgreens is a fine tenant. But some of these big stores are going to be gone. They're going to be filing, Chapter 11s, and they're not coming back. There's going to be a lot that are going to be gone. So be careful who you get as a tenant, because 1031 normally you're getting a real solid tenant. But in any case,
I'm just a small owner. I mean, I used
Gotcha.
to live in the home. I moved out of state to be closer to family, and so I rented the property. I mean, I'm certainly not in the same pond as most of the people on the call, but
gotcha.
It pays my bills now, truly, and I've got it listed. I talked to a realtor, but the tenants are not calling either me or the realtor back.
Are
so
you?
My question is,
yeah.
Can I list it and give them 24 hours notice, whether they return the call or not, and then have the showings continue with that 24-hour notice? And then secondarily, if the answer is yes, and people walk in the house when they haven't confirmed, I guarantee I get some screaming tenants.
Probably you will.
Can I have them call my attorney?
Probably you will. I wouldn't suggest having call the attorney because there's nothing the attorney could do at that point. The reality is they may even call the police. How dare they bring people in during COVID? This is dangerous. I mean, if everybody comes having washed their hands with a mask on, properly on, not like what's her name? Who kept screaming, impeach 45, impeach 45. Maxine Waters, who was pictured with the mask, covering like this, not covering her nose because she's a moron. Have the people come with masks and be polite and say, hey, folks, we have a showing. We can, wait if you guys want to, step outside the backyard or whatever, but it's your right. It's in the lease. This law does not override that. So I don't know what the police would do if they show up. Honestly, this is uncharted territory. I have no idea. But it seems to be that you're on solid ground. Why are they not answering you? Why are they not answering you? Because they don't give a shit. They don't want to answer you.
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah.
And okay, so I got another question here.
Avoid me as long as they can.
Yeah, of course. And since we can't now, do you have a note on the property, or does CARES Act apply to this property or not? Do you know?
No, I sent over the affidavit.
Oh, you did send it. Okay, right. So we're filing that. We're filing that.
Yeah.
We and I don't remember if it's been filed or not. It's probably not. If it was earlier this week, they're not yet filed, but we're filing it.
I'm not sure it filed yet.
Okay. So and normally
I'd love to just get them out.
Yeah, but we're not going to have a court date until probably June, realistically. So
yeah, I know.
Now, Hussein, how's it going, man? Is it wise to include social distancing provisions in future leases to ensure safety of contractors, tenants, etc.? I don't know. That's an interesting question. And to help with future communications, it's an interesting question. I'm not sure. I don't know that you could put in anything without it ending up being just this long drawn out thing. I would say, let's revisit that question. I'm going to talk to, and we got another attorney jumping in here. He says not only leases, but every contract in the world is going to be rewritten. Realistically, Les, I don't know. What do you think? I don't think it's really necessary. We've always had disease. We're going to have a what's it called? What's the vaccine? We're going to have a vaccine for it soon enough. This is not so novel. It's a novel coronavirus, but why do existing drugs, a scat of existing drugs, work, they believe? And when they say they believe, and the only people who are saying, this is not true, Donald Trump's a liar, he's doing... And speaking of landlords, that's my landlord at my office is calling me. I'm on time with my rent, so I'm not sure why. But what was I saying? The idea that these drugs, which are getting 100% anecdotal only cure rate, that the idea that that's not evidence because it's only anecdotal. The people who say, it's only anecdotal, don't understand what the word anecdotal means. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. But I mentioned to my wife over the last couple of days, just when we were chatting, that I believe the single most important class I ever took through years of high school, college, law school, grad school, the single most important class I ever took was basic statistics that I took as an undergrad in the University of Pittsburgh. Greatest class I ever took. Why? Because statistics, a basic course in statistics, enables you to see through the bullshit. And the idea that, it's only anecdotal means that it has no worth is fallacy. Okay? Anecdotal evidence, as opposed to what? In this case, as opposed to a double-blind random study, controlled study over the course of 6 months, all the FDA approval, et cetera, et cetera. That would be nice, but we don't have the friggin' time. A coronavirus is a known quantity. This particular novel coronavirus that was created in a Wuhan lab, probably purposely made more virulent, more catchy, that is something which is a known quantity. And that is why the drugs are working. That is why perhaps we should be manufacturing more and more of this hydroxychloroquine and other things that are working. And somebody pointed out to me in a conversation last night that there's another one which is even more efficacy on it. They should be doing that like there's no tomorrow. Why? Because it's curable. Not for everybody. People will die. People die all the time. That's harsh, but that's real. Every year, the flu kills 50, 60,000 people in this country alone. And the numbers we have on this disease include people who should not be included as a COVID death. We all know that. Dr. Birx confirmed that in Tuesday or Monday's last update. So, got a couple of other questions here, though. So, new force majeure language, Les suggests, in response to Hussein's question. He says business interruption clauses in most insurance policies are not covering. So, there's going to be a ton of litigation. I don't know why business interruption insurance doesn't cover this. Because insurance companies never want to pay. Everybody watched the movie Rainmaker. That movie was real. It was fiction, John Grisham book, but it's real in that insurance companies want to deny. Their entire purpose is to deny. And you all remember the scene, deny, 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 and then transfer it to this person, and then they'll deny. When they found the secret manuals of the evil insurance company, it's not that far off. Insurance companies, of course, they're going to be denying this. I wish I had business interruption insurance. I don't. Bad on me. But it probably wouldn't be covering because every insurance company would be going out of business if, in fact, it was covered. Now, the government's coming in with this disaster plan, and apparently I got $2,000 from that. Okay, cool. And because it's based on the number of employees, I've got 2 employees, so I got $2,000. That's the SBA disaster thing. And then there's the PPP, which I'm supposed to get, and apparently I was approved for it. But they've run out of money on that. So the insurance companies are going to say, hey, well, people got, the PPP and they got this. Well, they've run out of money. So if you didn't jump on it like on day one, and I was very worried because I jumped on it day one, then I had to shut down for a few days, because the first day is a Passover. But we got stuff done that following Sunday, et cetera, et cetera. It seems like I got in time. So Hussein then commented, do you think tenant confidence is shook for tenants to find new houses to lease in the near future? I don't know. Hussein, I'm not a good judge of the market. Never ask me for, my investment advice. It's never a good idea. But we shall see. Les agrees on the insurance. It's, this is not war. Is it not an act of God? Maybe it is an act of God. it's an act of the Chinese Communist Party. But the actual base virus was designed by God, for sure. It was modified, almost certainly, in the Wuhan Institute of Virology, or the other one a few kilometers away. It did not spontaneously arise in the disgusting wet markets, okay? And I'm sorry, people who are into eating freaky shit, that market is revolting. So, get your freaky shit at a better place. But that's where we stand. But any other thoughts? Do landlords have the right that requests tenants disclose timely if they are positive? Okay, so actually, Hussein, this is an interesting question, because I had a client who was watching. I don't know if they're still watching. Let's see, can I, my viewers, it doesn't show me. I don't know how to tell who's viewing, but one of my clients asked me about this, because they said they had somebody who apparently tested positive back on March 10th, and they're in an apartment complex. It's not a single family residence, it's an apartment complex. But it's an open air kind of thing. Do they need to tell others? I don't know the answer to that, because then it's coming into like HIPAA and stuff. We as landlords don't have any kind of obligation not to violate HIPAA, but do we have a right to tell people about this? I don't know the answer to that. I do know this is a problem. This is a problem for communicability. My brother-in-law lives in Brooklyn. He lives on the second floor with his wife of a duplex that they own, and the first floor tenant didn't bother to tell him till long after the fact, oh, by the way, I've got coronavirus. That tenant, that dumbass that didn't bother to tell him. Now, they don't share a front door, but they share kind of space at the front door. It's in Brooklyn. It's a, like a brownstone, 2-story, and plus a basement. And my brother-in-law and his wife use the basement and the second floor. They have their own entrance, but they're 2 feet apart. So, this tenant, it's not like he's ignorant about medical stuff. He's a freaking dentist. And he didn't see fit to tell his landlords, keep away from me, I've got coronavirus. I mean, what a shit. What a complete shit bag. But, such is life. Now, if it was a bigger building, would they have an obligation to tell the other tenants? I don't know. I would just advise everybody, it is very possible that some people in this building have coronavirus. Make sure the moment you walk inside from the outside, even if you just went out to grab your mail, wash your hands, do all the things the government is recommending, blah, 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 blah. Naming names, I think that's not necessarily a good idea. I don't think anybody's going to, successfully recover damages from you for releasing their personal private information. If you do happen to do it, I don't know. Any other questions? Questions? Something? Okay. Well, I think we could cut it there. I hope this was reasonably informative for everybody. Those of you on the join.me, thank you. And those of you on the Facebook Live, I really appreciate everybody kind of listening to me. I hope that, it's not a waste of your time. And I hope we all get through this soon with no destruction, because it's looking really bad. So sorry, leave it on that kind of depressing note. But whatever, it's Friday. It's the weekend. Every day is the weekend, it seems. And will the courts work weekends to catch up dockets? I don't know. Some of these, Hussein asks a good question. Thank you. You're welcome, Les. The courts do, some of these clerks sometimes work weekends. I didn't know that until quite recently, back in like January or February. One of the clerks who communicates with me, hey, Gilly, we're almost done, sorry. But one of the clerks who communicates with me via Facebook Messenger, usually, it's just like her preferred method. I had sent in a few cases on a Sunday back in January or February, and she said, "Oh, I'm processing your new cases." I'm like, "You're working on Sunday?" She's like, "Yeah, I work sometimes on Sunday." I don't know if she was telecommuting or working, probably working at the office, but I think they are allowed to. That's the St. Louis City Clerk's office. I don't know about the other offices. I'm never in there on the weekend. Will they work weekends? Maybe. I mean, I'd certainly recommend it. What will they do? I mean, they don't give a crap about my recommendations, So there were some other things that I was talking to them about vis-a-vis the dockets and everything, particularly in St. Louis County, which just basically all got put on hold when all this happened. But we had some interesting initial discussions just about the way the dockets are handled and changes that could happen. But none of this is going to be even looked at till I'd say 2021, because the rest of 2020 is just going to be catching up. It's going to be that bad, folks. I'm expecting, once we start filing cases, if it's July 26th, if the court's accepting them and giving me dockets, we're going to get dates in August. And I thank God the Jewish holidays this year give me one weekday that I'm shut down. Most years, the last several years, it's been like Monday, Tuesday, the following week, Tuesday, Wednesday for Yom Kippur. Then the following week, Monday, Tuesday, the following week, Monday, Tuesday. This year, it's Saturday, Sunday, following week, Sunday afternoon to Monday. So one Monday I'm off for Yom Kippur. And then the following week, Saturday, Sunday, the following week, Saturday, Sunday. So that's a good thing. The only thing that I'm going to be out of town for, 100% guaranteed, God willing, the Bike for Chai will happen. And that's on August, I believe, 12th to 13th. Let's take a look. It is on August, June, July, August. I didn't put it in here, but yeah, it's the 12th to 13th. So I'll be leaving town on the 11th and back on the 14th. So this week, we will not have dockets. Okay? Any of these other Thursdays, I plan to do it. I'm going to ask them for a Wednesday docket as well. Hopefully they'll give it to me. None of this stuff is in my future yet. I had actually deleted a bunch of dates because we don't know what's going to happen now with the change of docket, the change of courtroom. So that's basically it. Anything else while we still got everybody here? Stacy, come on. You always have questions, Stacy.
Well, okay, hang on.
All right.
It wasn't a question. It was more of a comment because you've answered all of my questions for me.
Okay.
But, okay, so this is not nice. Shocker. But it's
as long as it's not about me. If it's not nice about me, then forget about it.
This is a true indictment of myself.
Okay.
But I knew the stimulus checks had come out because my parking lot started to look like Black Friday. There was TVs rolling in. So there was actually a...
Take pictures of them. You should have taken pictures of all this shit.
I have one. I'm going to send it to you. A guy actually went and got one of those 1999 trucks and had a giant TV moving up, dragging it into his apartment. I was like, oh my God, the stimulus checks are out. I was joking.
Is he on time with his... Is this dude on time with his rent?
No. Oh God, no.
How far behind?
This month.
What a fucking prick. Pardon my fucking French.
I swear to God, it's like Black Friday. There's nothing but cartons for TVs and computers sitting out there.
And their response is going to be, well, our kids are stuck at home. We need a new TV.
The government wants us to be a homeless shelter, and they're not going to let us move anyone out of here who's that far behind. It's $3,000 to $4,000 behind in rent for all these months that we had Brit on. But this place looks like Black Friday.
I'd recommend, and if any of you are also, still on listening, I'd recommend everybody take pictures of this kind of shit. And actually, Stacy, don't let me forget, I'm going to try to get something out. All Chinese, Kyle points out, all Chinese-made TVs. Better fucking not be Chinese-made TVs. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know what's made in China. I mean, I've tried for years not to buy Chinese stuff if it's a big ticket item. Now, I'm really going to try not to buy anything made in China, honestly. I don't know if I simply can't switch from an iPhone. So I have no choice but to buy iPhones and Mac computers because I am 100% Mac. I can't function otherwise. I tried an Android made phone once. I can't do it. But with the exception of that, I mean, a few years ago, my I guess my one road bike ago, in 2005, I bought a Cannondale road bike, top of the line Cannondale Synapse, and that bike used to be made in America, and they transferred all their manufacture to mainland China. I would never buy another Cannondale again because of that, and I haven't. I got some Specialized, I believe, made in Taiwan. Most bikes now tend to be made in Taiwan. I have an S-Works Roubaix made in Taiwan. I would buy from any other country except China for a big ticket item. For small ticket items, it's very hard to shop that way, but I think we all should. That to Kyle's point, to Stacy's point, I hope that you and I, Stacy, are going to talk later today. I want to send out a note, or actually, if you can, let's circle back on Monday on that. I don't want to bombard anybody with another email today, but on Monday, we should do it because it's going to happen over the weekend. I'm going to recommend I'm going to send out something to all clients and suggest that everybody take pictures of this shit, because if that's happening. Yeah, I just saw that. Thanks for the stimulus, bitches. Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, reality is holy crap, if they're not paying their rent, and I would love to bring that to freaking court. You couldn't afford it, but here's the fucking TV you just bought. 75 inches, mother. Whatever. You know, they can afford that. They can afford to pay the rent. And that's the reality. That's the reality. So, language, your daughter's, I tried. I'm sorry. I was reading somebody's thing. Apologies, Chava. I should not use such intemperate language. Why is my daughter watching a discussion about the CARES Act? Everybody is bored. But that's the reality. If they're buying TVs instead of paying their rent, I mean, everybody has to economize. Now, again, if they're the folks who are working for Amazon or Domino's Pizza, they have not lost their job, take that $1,200 stimulus check and, blow it on a TV, blow it on hats, whatever you want to do. That's fine. It's a free country. As long as they're enforcing the contracts, as long as they're enforcing our contracts. If they're not enforcing our contracts, then how dare they give stimulus checks like this? So I'm sorry, Chava, for using bad language. I really should not. But that's where we stand, Stacy. And Kyle's saying new cars is my experience. Yeah, some people are gonna buy new cars. Listen, one of the other ads that I saw repeated on the Hulu was Carvana with their touch-free, no-contact car delivery service. It's great. Smart people. Look, some people get a new car every 2 years, and if their lease is up, they got to get another car, or keep the car out of lease. But for some people, maybe this isn't the time to get a new car. Maybe it is. A lot of people have no idea that this is going to change things. Okay? This is the year that everything changes. That was the tagline to those of you who are Doctor Who fans who watched the spin-off show Torchwood. This is the year that everything changed, this is the century that everything changes. We're in a year where everything is new. We're in uncharted territory in uncountable ways. We're taking on trillions of dollars in new debt, which frankly is no problem in regular times because our government can afford debt. We'll grow out of the debt. I'm not worried about the trillions of dollars of debt. What I am worried about is whether or not our government is going to have the spine to eliminate the debt with China. That's what we need to do. This was an act of war. Whether it was the release of, exactly, Kyle, whether it was the release of the bio warfare, COVID-19, or on purpose, or it was the purposeful. When they knew in November, they knew the Chinese government, the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, the Chi-Coms, in November knew 100% this was highly contagious human-to-human transfer. So when the Chi-Coms, the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, the Chinese government purposely directed their lackey at the WHO, all of them are their lackeys, but in particular, the head of the WHO, Dr. Tedros, the terrorist, the Ethiopian Maoist party member who told the world as late as January 21st that this is no reason to shut down borders. This is not human-to-human transfer. I don't know what he knew. I don't care. He's a lackey of the Chinese Communist Party. He did know that he was taking orders, directions, 100%. He doesn't do what the CCP doesn't tell him what to do. We pay for that WHO, and we don't have our lackey in there. Instead, the CCP has their lackey in there. They pay 1/10 what we pay. And if we're paying for it, just like the UN, the Secretary General of the UN should be a US lackey. Let's just call it what it is. Okay? The UN and all those non-governmental organizations should be lackeys of ours. They should be doing America first policy. Okay? The fact that they're not is because our government's been run by globalists until Donald Trump. Okay? That includes George W. Bush. That includes his father. Read my lips. No new taxes. What a liar. Globalists, both of them. The last one who was not a globalist, and of course, Clinton, oh my gosh, and Obama, complete globalists. Okay? They're all globalists. They all want world government. They don't consider themselves citizens of the United States of America. They consider themselves citizens of the world. I'm not. To hell with the world. I'm a citizen of the United States of America. I don't want to be a citizen of a world society. I have no interest in that. Okay? I want to be part of the United States of America, and I want our government to look out for us. God bless Donald Trump. That's what he does when he's able to, when he's given free rein. When he's leashed, it's terrible. So he's the first one since Ronald Reagan who is truly not a globalist. Ronald Reagan was the last one we had who wasn't a globalist until now. And when the CCP, the Chi-Coms, the Chinese Communist Party, purposely failed to notify the world in November, they created this multi-trillion-dollar meltdown. Everybody who's out of work now, thank the Chi-Coms, thank the Chinese Communist Party. This doesn't mean there's anything wrong with Chinese folks. Not in China or here, except the ones who work for the Chinese Communist Party, which is many of them. It's a country of, 1.5, 1.7 billion people? A lot of them work for the government. Why? Because the government is the primary employer. Because many of those companies are, in fact, owned by the People's Army. You know, the two guys who were research associates arrested with the Harvard professor, reported on in February 4th by all the media for dealing with the Chi-Coms and working with the Wuhan Institute of Virology, those guys were with the Chinese People's Army. Okay? This is warfare. And by failing to notify the world purposely in November, they have created this pandemic. Now, personally, I believe that this was purposely designed and purposely released. I don't believe this was accidentally released. I believe the Chinese are smart enough to not accidentally release it. I don't believe they are like, people have likened this to Chernobyl. Okay? The Russians let Chernobyl melt down because they were truly a bunch of yahoos who were drunk probably at the time. Okay? That's what, and Chernobyl was just poorly maintained. Now, the conditions at the Wuhan Institute of Virology have been stated by people who work with them. They're lackeys in America. Some people who have been guests on CNN and widely quoted say, "Oh no, that place is very well run." They adhere to every bit the high standards that American labs adhere to. That's why they got the money from the United States government. I'm sorry. I'll even give them the benefit of the doubt on that. That's why I believe this was purposely released upon the world as a bio-warfare. Not accidental biowarfare, but purposeful biowarfare. But if it was accidental, it was known in November to be so virulent and contagious that the failure to truthfully notify the world in November, it makes this purposeful biowarfare by CCP, Chinese Communist Party, the Chi-Coms, on the whole bloody world. And that is an act of war. And I wish our government, I wish Donald Trump would declare it an act of war. We should cancel all debt that China holds with us. Japan has been talking about doing this, canceling the debt. They're also talking about pulling away. They're paying companies to move any kind of production from China. We should bring tons of companies if we want to keep them in the Far East. If it makes sense to keep them in the Far East, if it does, I mean, we have people that need to work here. If we do come out of this well financially in about a year from now, it's going to be for one reason, because we pull production back into America and we put Americans back to work like Donald Trump has been doing. Okay. But if we see fit to keep certain production offshore, or if it's not American companies, produce in Taiwan, Vietnam, Philippines. I mean, Taiwan, an actual republic of China, the country which is not allowed to be a member of the WHO, the World Health Organization. It's not the World Health Organization. It's the Chinese lackey organization. That's a mouthpiece for China. In the past, they've done things. In coronavirus, they've done nothing good. They helped destroy the world economy. Tadros, unpronounceable last name, the terrorist, the Maoist party member of Ethiopia, they did this to us. Hussein asked, what laws did China break? Can they be held accountable? International law means nothing. Okay? Yes, I'm saying that as a lawyer with a law degree and a law license. It's not on this wall. It's on the wall in my house. But it's up on a wall somewhere. International law means jack all. International law does not mean a thing. Law, as I said earlier, what's the business of government? To enforce contract, to enforce the law. Laws are certain contracts. But internationally, international law is enforced by armies, by threats, by relative power of superpowers. We are the only superpower. China wants to be the only superpower. It is close to being a superpower. They shouldn't have nukes. That was a mistake made long ago. They certainly shouldn't have biowarfare ability, which we've been funding. $3.4 million, I believe, or $4.3 million was the grant they've been much discussing in all the media that the United States federal government gave to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, WIV, the place which released the biowarfare upon the world that has caused trillions of dollars of damage and meltdown of the world economy. So what laws did China break, Hussein asks? I don't know. There's probably not a law out there that says don't commit biowarfare on other countries. Who cares? International law laws don't matter. They only matter for people who believe in these globalist, non-governmental organizations like International Criminal Court. You had one lawmaker, I believe she was a state-level lawmaker, but of course a Democrat from the party of traitors, from the party of hating America and forward the world government, the globalism, and also anti-Trump to the core. This woman talks about bringing charges against our president at the International Criminal Court, which is hilarious. Pardon me. Again, just dust in here, not coronavirus. Okay, just making that clear. But the globalists think the International Criminal Court means something. And it means something to other countries. But to America, it means nothing. It means nothing. There is no International Criminal Court as far as America is concerned. Why? Because we are not signatories to that stupid, short-sighted, lack of any basic civil rights document. You don't have the right to confront one's accuser in the International Criminal Court. You have no rules of evidence. You have no right to defend oneself in any manner. So, again, with respect to your question, what laws did they break? I don't know, maybe none. It doesn't matter whether they broke laws. They committed an act of war. What is an act of war? Define it yourself. I don't know. Can they be held accountable? Only if we declare war on them, officially or quietly. I think if we cancel all debt with them, that will be a tacit declaration of war, and that's perfectly okay with me. And then there was another comment from Kyle. Medical community knew about this in January, correct? They knew about it, yeah. And they realized how poorly they were prepared. They did everything they could. And I still am having this problem about tapping on this. I can't. Anyway, but the medical community was wrong. I don't blame individual doctors. I don't blame Dr. Fauci. He comes out with wrong things and then right things. The only thing I blame him for is that he's self-aggrandizing. And I also blame him for being a Hillary fan. But that doesn't matter. He's a good doctor. He knows his field. He's worked for several administrations. I don't blame Trump for keeping him on. Keep him on. He knows his business. But he's not an economist. He should only be speaking to the medical aspect. And the government has to make determinations based on the medical issues as well as the economic issues and all sorts of other issues, is my thought. So, and then Ezra says, so I'm not crazy. Well, you might be crazy, but not about this. So, Jessica Sukadolski, how are you doing? So that's basically it. We've gone really long. It's now been 2 hours. I appreciate everybody for giving me their time. I've got to go now. I'll speak to you all soon. Take care.